by the improving the government of the Republic of Indonesia, international countries, international and local non-government organizations, and the Indonesian people. Development in Aceh continue to be carried out in a sustainable manner under normal circumstances in order to realize people welfare, justice, fulfillment, and protection of human rights. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the planning system in Aceh has been integrated with the budgeting since 2090. We say A budgeting. Then in 2020, Aceh Province has been using the regional government information system application. We say in Indonesia SEPD. Promote Ministry of Home Affairs with accommodated planning, budgeting, financial administration system. However, the implementation of monitoring and evaluation is not yet integrated in SEPD. In Aceh, the implementation of monitoring and evaluation of development program and activity is carried out by its regional work unit, OPD. We say is SKPA. Aceh government has the work unit for the acceleration and the control of activity. We say is P2K APBA, Pusat Pengendalian Percepatan Kegiatan. I am the head of the P2K now in Aceh since 2020 until now. Including monitoring and evaluation of development, this innovation is used as the reference in monitoring and evaluation by several other regions in Indonesia, such as East Kalimantan, Gorontalo, North Sulawesi, Central Sulawesi, and East Java. The architect of this P2K is Mr. Takwala, Dr. Takwala, now to be the General Secretary of Aceh Province. I would like to highlight of one of the purpose of the seminar that is contributing in improving MONEV capacity of all development stakeholders through holistic and collaborative approach. It is in line with the Aceh mission, Aceh Siat. Aceh Siat is mean integrated of Aceh information system. The importance of the innovation and collaboration in monitoring and evaluation is the result of MONEV expected to be more focused, detailed, having a clear and measurable indicator by all the government level, according the three authorities. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end my speech by expressing our gratitude for the holding of the seminar. Thank you so much for your kindness attention. Hopefully we are blessed by the God with the health, happiness, and positive thinking and negative COVID, to ability to give the most benefit for human being in development. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Pak Teguh Ahmad Dadek, for a very nice opening and also a brief profile and also history of the Aceh development before and now. So, Bapak Ibu, let me continue with the panel sessions. So just to give you a brief overview of the topic. So basically COVID-19 pandemic occurred abruptly. So it is an unexpected disaster. We call it as a social disaster. So uncertain treatment for this damage increase excessive anxiety to the development practitioner, from the government to the civil society, including to the evaluation society like us. This is one of the reasons why we sit here today. Can we do this? How can we survive? So let alone the pandemic, the recent political conflict, disaster from forest fire, floods, flash floods, landslide, to earthquake in the early week of 2021, bring pressure and slew of crises to Indonesia. So today we are here to discuss robust preparedness and the role of evaluation to prevent, detect, and respond to any emergency situation in a fragile context or situation of conflict, violence, disaster, and uncertainty, learning from Aceh and also Indonesia in general. Also from Gaza, Kabul, and Beirut. So this panel session will be presented by global expert with credibility and expertise in fragility, conflict, and vulnerability contexts and evaluations. And we are very lucky here to have them here. Thank you, Bapak-Bapak. So we don't have Ibu here, sorry for that, but it is a bit challenging to find a resource person focused on FCV context. So now let me introduce today the presenter panelists. So we have Pak Muammar Febri. Pak Muammar Febri is originally from Aceh. So please turn on your video, Pak. Currently, he is in charge of the implementation of European Union program in ASEAN for the development cooperation program in the areas of climate resilience for urban areas, disaster management, and forest fire, with a total portfolio of 60 million euros. So this is a big number. Also previously in charge of post-disaster and conflict reconstruction as a delegation of the European Union. The second panelist will be Khalil Bitar, originally from Palestine. Please turn on your video, Khalil. So we are pleased to have you here. Khalil is the chair of the Eval Youth Global Network, founder of the Palestinian Evaluation Association. He is also a global activist, co-leader of the Eval for Action campaign with the UNFPA, recipient of the IOB Universiteit of Antwerpen, Belgium Alumni Impact Award in 2019. And currently completing his doctorate in Germany with a focus on evaluation in countries affected by vulnerability, conflict, and violence. So let's wait for him to finish his PhD soon, inshallah. And then we have Rauf Modagik, originally from Afghanistan. Kindly turn on your video, please. So he is in Kabul now and is board members of the Afghan Evaluation Society. He is also the director of monitoring and evaluation and communication of GIZ, Germany investment in Afghanistan. A development practitioner for more than 15 years in the field of monitoring, evaluation, and economic development, with value chain development in various national and international development, including with GIZ, GFA, USAID, and also FBAO. And then we have a big man here, Chief Ziad Mosa. So he is the former president of International Organization for Cooperation in Evaluation and Eval Partners. Thank you for being here. Please, oh, you already turned on your video. So Ziad also a senior global development evaluator for more than 20 years with experience in managing complex evaluation in 40 countries, including Indonesia. He also very familiar with the context of Middle East and North Africa region, as well as Global South. So he also have some extensive experience in the context of evaluation in vulnerability, conflict, post-conflict resolution, and also on system and process in local governance. He is also the founder of Middle East and North Africa Evaluation Association. So he is a very big man, not only literally, but also his role. Okay, and then we will have an insight from Indonesia FCB policy perspective by our expert, Dr. Suprayoga Hadi. So Dr. Subra Yoga Hadi is also a favorite speaker, so we are very lucky to have him here. Pak Yoga, kindly turn on your video. So currently he is the Deputy Minister under the Vice President Office, a very important role in the country now. So congratulations on your new role. And Pak Yoga, he is also the Chairman of Indonesian Association of Disaster Experts, and then chairman of the Indonesian Planners Association. He is also an activist in this context. He is the graduate of the Indonesian National Resilient Institute with an outstanding achievement. And then a former Deputy Minister and Director General under the Ministry of Village Development of Disadvantaged Area and Transmigrations. And also he is the recipient of the United States and Peace Awardee in male champion for the equity of demonstrating leadership and commitment to peace building. So thank you so much for being here. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any question during the presentation, Bapak Ibu, please type them into the question box in your Zoom chat box control panel. So I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for question at the end. Now, without further explanation, I think we will turn the time over to the first panelist, Bapak Muammar Febri. Pak Muammar, the time is yours now. Thank you. Enjoy the sessions.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Can you hear me? Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much, Ibu Mi. I'd like to thank you very much for inviting us to be at this event today, where we have a very distinguished guest, Bapak Dr. Sporadic Yoga Hadi, Deputy Vice President is here. Selamat sore, Pak Yoga. And then we have Pak Teguh Dade as well, Honorable Head of the Planning Agencies of Aceh, and Mr. Khalil Bitar from the Eval Youth Global, Mr. Rafuk Mudakit and Ziad Musa, and also, of course, Mr. Iwan Febrianto as an MC for this event. Today, I think we have a very interesting subject of the discussion, which is bringing the experience from Indonesia, particularly in Aceh, in response to what do Indonesia right when it comes into post-tsunami disaster rehab reconstruction and post-conflict recoveries. So I took a liberty to name my presentations in here in a very simplest term by outlining the road to recovery, particularly on the role of leaderships and monitoring. People used to see leadership and monitoring as two different things. From where we are sitting, actually, good leadership is monitoring. So good monitoring requires a good leadership. So you cannot really separate between leadership and monitoring, because one cannot do or cannot deliver the optimum outcome without having one another. So I use the terms of leadership and monitoring because I believe you can have a good monitoring, but without leaderships, there is no value of the monitoring. But you can have a good leadership without monitoring, and there is no tool for the decision-making process. So it's a two sides of the same coin, actually, leaderships and monitorings. Next slide, please. Okay, so talking about post-tsunami, I think Pak Dade has explained today in terms of the number of the casualties and so on, but there is something special about Aceh tsunami that really turned the attentions of the world. The entire world gave a spotlight to Aceh in particular. Tsunami did not only affect Indonesia, of course, it affects Thailand, it affects Sri Lanka, it affects even Malaysia and several other countries as well. But the image was very graphics, and the amount of the casualty was the biggest in Aceh, Indonesia. So the number of the casualties actually brings a lot of international solidarity, particularly in terms of media exposures. And this international solidarity, as projected by the media exposure, brings the influx of the external funding, which is enormous and also unprecedented. So in a way, the number of the casualties, inside the international solidarity, which then bring the influx of the external fundings. Fortunately, this influx of external funding also equally matched by the government of Indonesia, which basically projected the strong commitment from the government in building Aceh back better. So in fact, I'm not sure if anyone, I think everyone hears about the term of build back better. I believe the term was particularly very famous back in the day during the Aceh post-tsunami narrative. Was really, what do you call it, as a hype, yeah, this build back better terms. Nowadays, we listen this term again and again and again as a mantra, but it was really started, I think, to gain the tractions during the post-tsunami recovery back in 2025. Those equality match funding by the central government is also met with a strong planning at the central level. Today, we also feel very honored that we have the Deputy Vice President in here, but probably later Dr. Suprayo Gahadi will tell us, because he was the pen holder on designing the master plan for Aceh recovery and reconstruction days before the establishment of the Aceh Rehab and Recon agency. So actually the establishment of the BRR was a brainchild of the master plan itself. So I hope today he would be able to elaborate what was the tipping point? What makes the central government willing to establish a specific structures to deal with tsunami? I mean, these structures, you never seen it again. You have 2006 earthquake in Yogyakarta. Even now we have the Sulawesi earthquake. There is no special structure established again. So it was a very defining moment and very specific. So I believe there was a philosophical question that was addressed during the design of the master plans. But today, when we're looking at it, maybe more than 15 years after that, it was a very good decision. Those things would never been done this way unless there are specific entity dedicated for the establishment of the specific entity at the ministerial level to deliver the rehabilitation and reconstruction process. So all in all, I think the bottom line is that everything, strong planning, funding, this cannot be done without a very strong political support. So back in 2004, our honorable previous president, SBY, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, was just, I think few months after his inaugurations. So it was on his first term, and then suddenly tsunami hit hard, and it hurts in the westernmost provinces in Indonesia, which is also has been torn apart for 30 years conflicts. So in a way, I think the strong political commitment needs to be projected, and it was projected very well. And it's not just only commitment because it is turned into an operational actions. Next slide, please. So I'm trying to give, because this was probably done in more than 16 or 17 years ago. So looking back into the past memories, time has given us a luxury to see things in a more strategic matters, and also give us the ability to pinpoint where do we get it right or where do we get it wrong. So I think one of the thing after the establishment of this special entity, we call it Aceh Rehabilitation Reconstruction Agency, is also putting the right man for the right job. Yeah. So this right man in the right job was chosen based on the experience, based on his perseverance, and also based on his understanding on the systemic issues in dealing with the development and crisis. So the leadership that was chosen by the president project a strong credibilities, and this credibility invites more funding, invites donors' attention, invites more contributions, and also in a way calms the political arena, both in Jakarta and in Aceh itself. The second point is that this Aceh Rehabilitation Reconstruction Agency, again, having been chaired with a very strong leadership itself, they know very well that leaderships requires a good communications. So what they did right on the onset of the establishment is that pushing for very strong communication machinery by hiring global consulting firms that deals with the strategic communications. So it's not hiring national companies, but they brought top-notch international consulting firm to design a tailor-made strategic communication and how to communicate the best message with people who has been torn by 30 years of conflict and then suddenly has been destroyed by the massive unprecedented tsunamis. The third one is the way we see it is that is the ability of the leadership to push a system thinking. So when it comes into development, it is imperative to have a system thinking. Thinking cannot be sporadic, it cannot be spontaneous, but employing a deep structural system thinking is very important. And this was not only done by the bureaucrats or by the professional attached or seconded to the Aceh Rehabilitation Reconstruction agencies. This was supported by Inter alia 2021 most prestigious consulting firms. I'm not going to name the consulting firms, but you can Google it. There are 4 of them that was working tirelessly from day one to support the Aceh Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Agency to deal with this, to develop the right system thinking in dealing with post-tsunami recoveries. The fourth is that is about human resources. It was very unique because right on the establishment of the agency, you see the inclusivity of all actors. You see people from the NGOs, you see people from the activists, you see people from the political awareness, you see people from the central government, you see HNEs, you see local HNEs from the sub-district level, all well represented at the inclusivities, very strong inclusivities. These were also taken to the next level once there was a peace agreement between the Freedom Aceh Movement and Government of Indonesia, whereby we seen the top Aceh Freedom Movement leadership was on board on the Aceh Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Agency as a linchpin, as a key people working on the post-tsunami recoveries. The fifth is that the distribution of cakes at all levels. As you know, the rehabilitation brings enormous amount of funds. So we've seen a very good distribution of resources in terms of work packages between elites, non-elite, everyone at that time, they got their fair shares. Jobbers, a worker, small contractors, suppliers, everyone get their fair shares of the cakes. So it's not being co-opted or it's not being controlled by a certain group of people, but it was equally distributed at all levels in a very, equal way. The last 2 points is that there is a strong monitoring system, connecting with the leadership, connecting with the strong communication machinery. Right on the onset, the Aceh Rehabilitation Reconstruction Agency, they established a RUN database system, which we call it Rehabilitasi Aceh and NIAS database system. This database is very important because it's not only tracking the government spending, but also keep track and keep tab of all of the donors funding, international NGOs, international organization, charitable organization that is working in Aceh. They monitors everything through this RUN database. It was a very heavy database. I remember back in the day, I used to work in Aceh, so we have to fill those information on a monthly basis, and there was a monthly meeting as well, organized by the System Information Management Unit of the Aceh Rehabilitation Agencies, which keep tracks and validate those information on a frequent basis. The last point I'd like to bring on the post-tsunami is the business continuity post-rehab recon. Now, this is the beauty of it because the whole planning was designed at the central level. So when the mandate of the Aceh Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Agency ended, it was not ended abruptly. The Ministry of Planning taking over as a role in facilitating the transitional process from the rehab recon into a normal development process. The EU was very proud because we provide a strong support to this program. We call it R2C3. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Yoga. Pak Yoga was the project director at the time. So this R2C3 is basically a special program attached to the National Planning Agency, helping to conclude all the transitional, all the programs that is ending or still continuing after the tenure of the Rehab Recon agencies. So you can see how integrated between the central and the special structure when the special structure terminated, the central government taking over. So the whole thing was stitched in a very nice way. So that leads into a successful post-tsunami recoveries. Next, please. Next slide, please.
So
okay.
You have three minutes, Pak. Thank you.
Okay, so the thank you, Baumi. I will try to be very brief. So now we're going to the post-conflict recovery. I think the main detrimental factor was a very strong political commitment of peace within the government of Indonesia and GAM. After the tsunami, it opens their eyes. You have to put the difference. Otherwise, there is no way we can rebuild Aceh better. And it was supported by international backups or brokerage, EU, AMM, CMI, and then resulted the MOU Helsinki's. But the way we see it, there was also some issues, is particularly on the exclusivity of the peace governing structures. Because once this BRA, I happen to work with the BRA as well at some point, so that the governing structure is very exclusive. And then one of the points that we've seen is that the good planning that was done at the central level was somehow diluted at the local level, perhaps due to lack of technical skill and so on. And then also there was also some issue, particularly on the lack of the perceived, I'm not saying it's very concrete, but it's a perceived of credibility of the governing structures from the external actors. But this is explainable because most of the people who sits there are people who's coming basically just came down from the forest. They came down as an ex-rebel, or they came out from exiles and from overseas. So there is still lack of ability of governing or administrating the post-conflict recovery program under the Aceh integration agencies. And also because most of these people are political appointees, what we've seen as well, it was not matched by strong bureaucracy. I think having a strong political appointees is important, but at the same time, you need a strong bureaucracy to back you up, because without strong bureaucracy, nothing will happen. So the outcome was not bad, because Aceh has a spatial autonomy of fund with high degree of political autonomy, but with limited bureaucracy and financial autonomy, which now Aceh people are enjoying this substantial amount of funds. And also they have inherited what we call is a monitoring system to Aceh government, or P2K. But this P2K is a brainchild of the Aceh post-tsunami recoveries. Next slide, please. So all in all, what I can conclude from the post-conflict recovery in Aceh is the initiative was sporadic instead of systemic. There was support from strong government funding from Indonesia, but it was unequally matched by donor funding, sadly. So it was not the same case as we've seen in the tsunamis, yeah? And then the fourth point is there was a strong competition within post-conflict and post-tsunami in terms of distribution of aid, because most of the post-conflict areas is on the highlands or within the inner part of Aceh, and most of the tsunami-affected areas is on the coast areas. And one of the things that we learned, because again, I speak from my experience in the Aceh reintegration agency, is there is a limited monitoring capabilities. There was some idea, in fact, at that time we tried to establish what we call as Aceh Peace Resource Information System, but this information resource systems never been really rolled out. In fact, it died out during the first implementation phase. So one of the key points as well, the last point I'd like to make, is that the weakness was very much focused on the distribution of aid instead of long-term development solution. Next slide, sis. This is going to be my final slide. So what can we learn from the Aceh post-recovery and post-tsunami? First, good work takes time. So Aceh Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Agency with the planning agency in Jakarta, they really took their time, yeah, to plan and execute. So there was no rush. They took their time, they understand the political pressure, but it's better to get the thinking right instead of rush. So the third point I'd like to make is that I think there was a strong understanding that you need to think of having a good monitoring first before start planning. So a good planner will start to think first. Is it something monitorable before they plan, or it's not planning first and then think whether this can be monitorable? So good plan is monitorable, but when we start planning, I think the first standpoint should be, is this something monitorable or not? Otherwise, we should not plan for that. And then last but not least is feedback. Feedback loop is the key. I think this is the very, very important point. In any post-recovery project, post-disaster, post-conflict, having a strong feedback loop is very important to the leaderships to lead and to determine their next step. So strong monitoring, strong data information is the key in terms to achieve those development objectives. I'd like to close my presentation by quoting this is the line used by US Navy SEALs, but I really like this term because I think this plays very well in terms of the importance of taking things slow in planning and executing. So I think this was very well done by Aceh Rehabilitation and Reconstruction agencies, yeah, in taking their time. It reads like this: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So when you do things smooth, yeah, do things smooth slowly at the beginning, the whole reconstruction will turn out very nice. And because of the smoothness, it turns out to be very fast. Thank you very much, Ibu Umi.
Thank you, Pak Muammar, for a very nice presentation. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Good plan is monitorable, and feedback loop is the key. So this is a very important point that we can take from Pak Muammar Febri. So I think this is very important reflection based on Pak Muammar experience during his professional works and during his observation toward the development in Aceh before and during and after disaster and also the conflict. Thank you, Pak Muammar. Now we are moving to our fellow brother from Palestine, Khalil Bitar. So he will share his knowledge on evaluation in FCV, fragility, conflict and vulnerability context in development evaluations. So, and then moving to the stories about development in Gaza, Palestine. So Khalil, the floor is yours now. Thank you. You have 15
Yeah, 15 minutes. Thank you so much, Umi. I appreciate the invitation, and assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thanks to MONEV Studio, this very creative association, organization, and a project, particularly to Umi, who is a pioneer in this field and has been contributing. I remember the first time I joined the Global Evaluation Forum. I joined the second time she was there. I remember she was in Thailand before for the first one. And she's very active in her own country, but globally as well. And this commitment, what actually contribute to having us here today, which I really appreciate. I am from Palestine, currently in Germany for my research for PhD, but I was born and raised in Palestine. Sorry, it's just some, if you could mute, please. And my focus area or the topic I'd like to discuss about today, I titled the presentation as Evaluation Under Occupation. But I will talk a little bit more about evaluation generally in conflict affected areas and fragility as well. This presentation also informed by two main things, let's say. This is an article I published in 2015 called Evaluation Under Occupation, the role of evaluators in protecting and promoting social justice and equity in conflict-affected and fragile context. If you like to have access to it, it's a New Directions for Evaluation journal, but I will talk a little bit about some of the findings from this article. Also informed by the PhD research that focused on how did the Palestinian National Monitoring and Evaluation System on the government level has influenced education policy in general, but with the focus on education policy in occupied Palestinian territories, OPT. And I focus on asking if this system was really institutionalized or not, if it's contributing to promoting evidence-based policy, and how conflict and fragility have contributed to this system and its achievements. So first, a little bit of context. This is the map of Palestine. Very quickly, this part in yellow is now what is called Israel. It was occupied in 1945. And what left is the West Bank and Gaza Strip. West Bank to the right here, and Gaza Strip to the left. I am from a city called Hebron, Al-Khalil. My name is Khalil. I usually joke that the city was named after me, but it's the other way around actually. And here Jerusalem, and here the rest of the bank. Israel also occupies the Golan Heights and used to occupy part of Lebanon, here Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. In Palestine, there are two governments, unfortunately, since 2006, 2007. In the West Bank, you have the Palestinian National Authority, led by Fatah, Yasser Arafat before, and the Gaza Strip, led by Hamas. And within the West Bank, there are three areas, A, B, C, as categorized by the occupation. Actually, the West Bank and Gaza, only 22% of the whole Palestine. And 60% of this 22% is now controlled by Israel still. So it's not really a country or anything here. And in terms of governance, until 2007, the Palestinian National Authority was controlling both parts. And it's a government that is weak, of course, because it's under occupation, but controls the civil life in Palestine. Since the mid-1990s, we had the Oslo Peace Accords, by which established this governance structure in this way. And we're supposed to close in 2000 and to have a Palestinian state, but this didn't happen. Governmental infrastructure are generally have been built a lot since the 1990s. But for example, this is a picture from the airport in Gaza. It was destroyed during the Intifada, the uprising. And you have the wall that started building also around 2000, and it cuts Palestinian cities this way, like I have showed here. There's a great level of unemployment, especially in the Gaza Strip, sometimes reaching 40, 50, or sometimes more. Now with COVID is even higher. Conflict is not always continuous, but it happens from time to time, and there are many challenges because mainly our border with Egypt is closed. Gaza is a big prison. The West Bank cannot cross except for Jordan. A lot of Palestinian workers work in Israel, and some of them actually, unfortunately, work in settlements that are all over the West Bank. Palestine, maybe you'll be surprised to hear this, for many countries until recently, has had the highest per capita donor aid around the world, around $600 annually, which is the highest all around the world. Recently, of course, USAID cut aid with Trump and all of that, but still very high aid from the European Union, Arab countries, oil-rich countries, the US, Japan, and so many other donors. I know also Indonesia, support in Palestine and build infrastructures and clinics and hospitals. So a lot of solidarity also from fellow Muslim countries and population. Finally, just to say a word about what has happened now with the COVID crisis. With the COVID crisis, Palestinian territories did quite well if you compare them to so many other countries and even Israel. But that's because it's closed. Not a lot of people can get in. There are, the government could control, but unfortunately, some of the people, the labor used to work in Israel, brought a lot of the COVID with them, and now increased with 500 to 1,000, the rate of daily infection. So it's quite high now. And Israel now, it's a success story in terms of COVID vaccination, but they're not vaccinating Palestinian prisoners or Palestinians, although we are under occupation. The WHO, the World Health Organization, yesterday ruled that Israel should actually vaccinate the Palestinians, but Israel refused and said they have their own government. But we don't control our border, we don't control anything. One, in terms of natural disaster, we have big problem with water. All our water resources are controlled by Israel in Palestine. So although the country, different from Jordan, for example, or Egypt or other countries, we have a lot of water resources, but they're controlled by the occupation. So settlers will enjoy, I think, 400 meters square of a monthly or something like this, and the Palestinians don't, very, very, very small percentages. And finally, with the climate change and environmental crisis happening, there's not a lot of awareness within the Palestinian people about the climate change. Many, and I actually work on this recently, many people say, okay, we'll care about climate change after the occupation ends, because the focus is on occupation. So this is the context in general. So a little bit now about 3 key points to remember about the situation in Palestine. First, evaluators are facing a lot of methodological, ethical, and many other problems like other evaluators. But in Palestine, I already highlighted the role of the military occupation of Israel. But there is also occupation as a scapegoat. Government officials usually, unfortunately, who sometimes corrupt, who sometimes are not good, sometimes good, but they can do things. They often blame the conflict. They blame Israel, which is true in many cases, but in other cases, no, it's failure on their own. They don't admit this. So any success is due to their genius policies. Any failure, and it's a lot of it, it's because of the occupation. And evaluators, when they come and evaluate, if they don't say that, it's a big problem. Also, there are restricted access. I showed on the map, for example, here, if you are in the West Bank, you cannot go to Jerusalem. Here, you cannot even go to Jerusalem because it's a closed area. You cannot go to other areas in the West Bank. It's easier than going to Jerusalem, but still hard. There's no way to go from Gaza except for some humanitarian aid workers. In same areas in Gaza as well, sometimes they can close it, but now it's free of occupation, but it's closed as a prison. So Area C, it's not accessible to evaluators, although it is a lot of projects happen in it. So the restriction on access and mobility is huge. And finally, and this is common in many, unfortunately, developing countries, that we have lack of strong evaluation cultures. We don't have demand for evaluation within our governments and civil society organizations. Unfortunately, the donors have to request it in order for us to see its importance. This is changing, but it's not changing on any base that is strong enough to create a strong national evaluation culture. In 2013, we created the Palestinian Evaluation Association in order to help with that. We have had since then several projects working with the government on SDG monitoring before that, and now with national evaluation system. But this is a slow because the culture really does not focus on evaluation, and financial resources are limited. And now, speaking about the national evaluation system and informed by the PhD research, the theory goes like this. You have government-led national monitoring and evaluation system. This will lead to evidence-based policy. And this will lead to governance reform or good governance, whatever you want to call it. You know, all the literature talk about this, even with the fragility, conflict, and violence. The World Bank, IMF, a lot of international organizations, even academia promote that. But with my research, for example, and literature review, I found so many factors stemming from the conflict, but sometimes not necessarily directly linked to it, that lead to problems in this theory. You know, it does not happen on the ground. There's a weak sovereignty. For example, when the country does not control all the areas, the national land, they cannot implement some policies. They cannot do monitoring evaluation in certain schools. They cannot collect data. It's really, really a problem. Second, weak democracy. A Palestinian minister does not feel he is or she is accountable to the people, unfortunately. Maybe to their political parties, maybe to the president, because unfortunately we don't have elections since 2017. Hamas was elected then and refused by the international community. And then this is what happened. You know, the elections never happened again. The president stayed until then. So the minister does not necessarily feel that if he did something bad, people will not vote for him next time. And foreign aid dependency. This comes all the time in my research, that the dependency, actually foreign aid, the previous speaker, Mr. Muammar, spoke a lot about how donor aid helped in the case of Indonesia and with the recovery from tsunami and conflict affected. But in Palestine, very many studies showing that 60% of aid actually is benefiting Israel. For example, by taking taxes, by buying Israeli products, by bringing Israeli machinery, and so on. And a lot of it goes back to the donor countries. So Palestinians are benefiting only in terms of employment. For some civil society people whose salaries are higher than the government one, like 3, 4, 10 times sometimes, and they attract the best people, and unfortunately the government cannot afford this. So this is maybe superficial, but there are so many factors that I am happy to explain if I had more time, and I'm just aware that I have a couple of minutes. In addition to this, of course, we cannot ignore conflict and fragility and violence factors. They come up, but all my point is that they don't come up in the way that is often discussed in literature, in reality. Finally, I think it's already 15 minutes or so. Just want to say that you often hear the stories about Palestine and everything, but also there is, you know, progress in terms of
you have 2 minutes.
Development.
Sorry.
Yes, no worries. You have a lot of progress in terms of development itself. It's very resilient people, and this mentality of the resilience, unfortunately, you know, the previous speaker again spoke about leadership. Sometimes I feel we lack that in our own countries with leadership and everything, but people themselves are resilient. And I hope, and I know actually many from Indonesia visit Palestine often. This is Jerusalem, this is Hebron, my city, and many actually visit the two cities. But I hope that you will have the opportunity to come and visit Palestine. And I'm more than happy to answer any of the questions if you have also about this. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shukran. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. Thank you so much, Khalil, for a very nice presentation and also sharing about the recent situation in Gaza, in Hebron, in generally in Palestine. This is really because, you know, Indonesia have a very big concern to what's happening in Palestine. So please hold your questions, Bapak and Ibu, but please remain typing your question in the chat box. We will pick them up later after all presentation. So next we have our brother fellow from Afghanistan, Rauf Modagik, to share about the recent development and also learning from previous situation during the conflict and also post-conflict, and also perhaps because they are now on a negotiation process between the government of Afghanistan and also the Taliban. I think that's also quite important, how that may affect the development and also evaluation in Afghanistan. Thank you. You have 15 minutes, Rauf.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Claire?
Yes, very clear. Yes, very clear.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me for this really enriched session where we could share and also listen from other practices. It was really difficult to arrange a presentation to give a kind of a food for thought for our colleagues around the screens, I would call it. What I did, I put very general and generic points about Afghanistan, development processes, planning processes, and at the same time also to grasp the planning stages and who are doing evaluation or monitoring in Afghanistan. So apologize if you see a lot of general information in my presentation. This is a picture from Kabul. Well, actually, it doesn't really look like this always because we have pollution problem here, because currently it's winter here. But this is the view of Kabul that you can see here. In my presentation, I will be discussing about Afghanistan, just to give you a feeling, what is Afghanistan, where we are about our development in the international indexes, what are the crises or conflicts or issues or challenge that the country is struggling. And also, I will also walk you through a historical, let's say, milestones where the conflicts were really born, let's say. And then I will be discussing about the impacts of the conflicts. What has these conflicts done with us or doing with us? Then the second part is about development policies and planning stages, where I will be discussing about how the planning process is taking place in Afghanistan on different levels. And then the last one that my presentation will be discussing is about the evaluation of development and how is the evaluation practices in Afghanistan, who are responsible and who are the stakeholders that are conducting evaluations in Afghanistan on the development trends. Yeah, this is Afghanistan, so I will not read the text on the presentation so you could see it. We are a landlocked country, unfortunately. According to the international indexes, we are not doing good. For example, our GDP, you can read it, the HDI, Human Development Index, we are not really great there. Poverty line, we were 36% below poverty line, but this is increasing. Now we are 47+% of our population are below poverty, who are making $2 per day or cannot make $2 per day. Then the corruption issue is a big issue in Afghanistan. So currently we are in the ranking of the countries with 173. Agriculture is the main occupation in Afghanistan. And then, of course, we have rich mines, minerals in Afghanistan, which are untouched. Talking about the evaluation policy, we don't have an evaluation policy. It's on a draft stage with the government, and of course, it's not implemented. Talking about crisis or conflicts or challenges that we do have. The first point I will be addressing your attention is the natural disasters, which includes the drought, avalanche, and all other nature act, I will call it. Then the other crisis, we do have increasing poverty. You know, that's really a crisis issue, I would call it. Internal displaced people, which is of course the causes the fight, the wars, insurgencies, and the extremists, and of course the displaced internal displaced people is also a cause of the natural disasters. Political instability is also another crisis, I would call it, which is we are engaged with that for the last couple of decades. Increasing of insurgencies or insurgency groups. Later on, when we discuss on who they are. COVID, of course, is another topic which is really hindering the development process in Afghanistan. The other topic is dependency on aid. So this is something we are receiving huge aid from international community, but this is a kind of a challenge for us because we get used to receiving things, but rather not thinking of what to be done. Corruption, of course, peace process with the Taliban. So that is a kind of a, I would call it crisis or challenges that we are struggling with. So these are the mother kind of crisis, I will call, that we are struggling in Afghanistan. A story of conflicts. Well, that starts with the from the year 1978, after pro-Soviet invasion, I will call it, in the communist regime. This also came to 9/11. I will not go into details, so I just put the years of the conflicts, what has happened in Afghanistan, but I will be discussing more after the 9/11 US invasion of Afghanistan and the current, let's say, government, which has started in 2002 until now. So this is the history of where the conflicts has been created, let's say, or caused. Impact of conflicts. Throughout this history, or the last 4 or 5 decades, of course, this caused us that we are part of this fragile and conflicted countries where we couldn't manage to achieve the MDG goals, of course, then the devastated economy that we do have, different economy system, of course, that's also the impact of the conflicts. A lot of internal displaced people, refugees migration that has started, of course, along from these conflicts. Then, of course, brain drain, destroyed of livelihoods, basic infrastructure that we had. So these conflicts ruin, let's say, all the basic infrastructure. During these conflicts, so more than 2 million people has been killed, which also created a big issue mentally and also physically. More than 3 million people has been wounded and disabled in Afghanistan for the last couple of decades. Of course, this also led us to have a lot of orphans, widows, which we have to take care. Yeah. Here, according to the Institute for War Studies, here you could see the map of Afghanistan, and this was developed in 2016. It shows the areas where the Afghan government is controlling, and also the area where the different insurgencies, I would call them belligerent group, that they are controlling Afghanistan. So including the Daesh or IS, then of course the Taliban areas which are controlling some part of Afghanistan. Corona crisis, yeah, I mean, that's really a big issue for all of us, of course, also in Afghanistan. And this caused a really negative impact on the consumption, exports, and remittances, industries and services, and at the same time, of course, jobs, basic living conditions. But on contrary, of course, this also, the Corona crisis also increased the agriculture sector somehow, so that the wheat production has increased. Currently, we don't have these lockdown or precautious measures, of course, are taken. We don't have a huge number of deaths, let's say, that has caused by Corona, but nevertheless, this has impacted or impacting us very badly. The outlook would be, of course, Afghanistan economy needs a lot of years for recovering. But at the same time, considering a lot of external factors or factors which we are struggling currently with it. Political uncertainty, where this leads to, continuous insecurity in Afghanistan, in the provinces and the districts, what's going on. And at the same time, the international community commitments, how they will continue working with Afghan government in future. So these are the factors which will massively influence our post-Corona recovery, I would call it. Here I will be talking about the story of development plans, which is happening after the Taliban regime. I will call it the new government since 2002. So usually what happens in the Afghan government is that the Afghan government plans together with international community about development projects or development strategies, how Afghanistan should look like. So I just named some of them here. So the first one was Afghanistan Compact, where the international community and the Afghan government described what to do on certain sectors to support Afghans there, to have good living conditions. Then the interim Afghan National Development Strategy popped up from 2006 until 2008. After that, in the Afghan National Development Strategy, which lasted until 2013. After that, then we had, after the election in 2014, we had this ANPDF, which is called Afghan National Peace and Development Framework first, which is still on until end of this year. And then currently we are also working on the new ANPDF, which will last until end of 2024. So this is the kind of the milestones or the big development policies that the Afghan government is developing together with our international community partners, which includes the donor countries and also UN and UN agencies. Well, what we have discussed about the development, the joint development plans for Afghanistan. So what are the source of discussion where these development plans are developed to make them contextualize there? So there are 4 levels. The first level is, of course, the ministry level. When I say ministry level, it's Kabul national base. So we call those programs national priority programs, which they are feeding and contributing for achieving this national development plans. Then on the provincial level, we have 34 provinces. In every province, we do have this provincial development councils, where they are discussing about the needs which are really focused based on the provinces. Because we do have different seasons in Afghanistan, this requires really different planning, even for agriculture and every development matters. Then we do have this district level, district development council, where they are developing ideas and giving it to the provincial level. Then going down to the village level, we call them community development councils, where they are developing ideas based on their needs, feed them to the district level development council, and then the district level provide them to the provincial and then to the ministry level. So this is the mechanism how the development projects or programs are developed on the national level. As an example here, the Afghan national...
more. Sorry, Rauf, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Here, as an example, I just have an excerpt of the NPDF where it talks really general about the development process in Afghanistan and the vision, which is, as an evaluator, I would question it very well here about being very concise there, which is not and measurable. So this is really general, the vision of the current plan that we do have on the national level. National development programs, for example, these are the programs which are contributing to ANPDF, so I will not read them, so you can have the presentation later on if you're interested. The evaluation of development. Afghanistan doesn't have an evaluation policy. We don't have an evaluation agency here in Afghanistan, but every ministry and donor country and stakeholders conduct their own possible evaluations on their portfolio where they are working. This really creates a lot of gap for maneuvering of different interests. Evaluation is not integrated into the Afghan development strategies because you cannot find a single monitoring and evaluation term in these development plans. The national priority programs are designed without baselines and general objectives, so where these programs are implemented by NGOs and international organizations. Of course, most of these practices, evaluations, and monitoring systems have to be adapted according to context conflicts, because conflicts are much faster than the planning of the development projects, which these systems are addressing. The challenges that currently we do have, of course, is the access, the movement, data quality, verification, validation. importance of impartiality and increase. This also increases a lot of using of third-party monitoring that the development projects and organizations are using currently. State studies and evaluations. I mean, there are different ministries which they are doing evaluations on national level. The President Office, the Ministry of Economy, which mostly concerned on SDG topics and evaluating or monitoring the small-scale development projects. Ministry of Finance on policy and value for money aspects. Then there's a joint committee for anti-corruption, but still monitoring development projects. Recently, this has been joined with the Anti-Corruption Commission. The National Statistic and Information Authority, which they are collecting information on national development indexes. And of course, every implementing organizations, NGOs are also having their evaluations which they are commissioning. Then of course, the Afghan Evaluation Society as an advocate of evaluation in Afghanistan. So we are there, and of course, other key players from the government of Afghanistan. The non-state actors on research and evaluation. There's a huge survey which is conducted every year by the Asia Foundation, which is called the Survey of Afghan People. This is relatively on the perception, not on the meaning of the progress. So how Afghans perceive development process. The other think tank is Afghan Research and Evaluation Unit with 2 decades of experience. CIGAR is a special American, let's say, instrument which they are conducting evaluation in Afghanistan on the US funded programs. Then some of the development partners are also conducting rigorous impact evaluations for their own implemented projects or funded projects. Yeah, so these are all, sorry, I was just rushing through, and of course I will be happy to discuss and share my thoughts on specifics that you might have questions. Thank you. Thank you, Amy, for being patient and accepting to use more time.
Thank you so much, Rauf, for very important sharing on the current situation in Afghanistan. So I note some important information, and also the red line between the speakers, that the role of the international support is really high. Dependency to this foreign aid is quite an issue here. And also one important lessons on the role of the independent, impartial third party during the peace negotiation process is also important, and how this monitoring persons or organization is really contributing to the process. We will discuss that later. So now we have the big man here, Ziad Musa, Chief of Evaluation People globally. So Ziad Musa will maybe update us with maybe the recent blast in Beirut. So what is else actually happening in Beirut? Because we heard that so many news or stories about the social unrest there. So maybe we can bring the person from there to confirm, and also the recent development in Beirut and Lebanon in general, and also a brief overview of the Middle East and North Africa after the Arab Spring, perhaps. So please, Chief, the floor is yours now. 20 minutes.
20 minutes, you're being generous, Umi, and all the time, chief. I mean, I'm an ex-chief, a retired chief. I took my retirement. I'm living happily ever after, but whenever I can, I try to share some insights. First, congrats for this safari, for this amazing panel. Obviously, I couldn't start my presentation without a little cartoon of the blast. But before, I want to share with you a little story that applies to Indonesia, that applies to Palestine, that applies to Afghanistan, to Lebanon, and much beyond. The story starts in a zoo. So once in a zoo, there was a camel asking his mother. He was thinking a bit aloud and wanted to get some answers. So his first question to his mother was that, like, why do camels have humps, mommy? So she said, you know, we're animals of the desert, so we have the hump so that we can store water, and we can survive this way without water. The next question of the camel was then, why our legs are long and our feet are round? She said, well, obviously, as desert animals, we need to have long legs and round feet so that we can walk in the sand without any problem. The little camel still had some questions. So he said, Mommy, why our eyelashes are long? So they really bother my sight. And the mom smiled and said, you know, the long eyelashes are basically to protect us from the sand and wind in the desert. So the little camel, who I suspect became an evaluator at a later stage, said, well, if the humps are to store water when we are in the desert, if the legs are to walk through the sand when we are in the desert, and the eyelashes are protect our eyes from the sun in the desert, what the hell are we doing in the zoo? And I feel many of the times, I mean, okay, we have within all of our countries great ideas and good expertise, and we are professionals of this wonderful profession, which is evaluation, and we try to speak truth to power, and we know what is right and what is wrong. But when we look at the complexity of the system around us, Khalil was mentioning that the politicians are corrupt and don't want to answer anyone. The other presenters were mentioning, you know, we have a great system, but we are tumbling on the corruption index, and we are tumbling down on the human development index, etc. So one of the basic dilemmas, I think, whether it's a natural disaster or not, whether it's a pandemic or not, whether it's a political crisis or not, is how to bridge that gap, or let's say how to break away from the prison walls in a way to make sure that evaluation helps somewhere in making a new system. Otherwise, we will be doing excellent evaluations, but, you know, things will continue in business as usual. What's going on in Lebanon? First, let me share with you some of our records. We are #1 in the world for the most refugees per 100,000 per 1,000 people. So in Lebanon, out of 1,000 people, there's 156 refugees from Syria, from Palestine, from Iraq, from Sudan, from you name it. So we're the champions. We are also third, not the first, in terms of the debt to the GDP. So we are indebted almost 1.5 times as much as the whole country could produce in 1 year without a single expense. And we're here competing with heavyweights. You know, Japan is Japan and has its industry, Greece is Greece and has Aristotle, Plato, and you know, all its natural heritage. Italy is Italy. Both Greece and Italy have the European Union, but we are, just for comparison, a little country of 10,000 square kilometers, the size of a lost island in Indonesia, you know, and we are competing with these folks. Also, in terms of inflation, I mean, Venezuela is taking inflation to stellar levels. so 2,000%. But you know, we're second after that at 65% in a year. So this means every morning when we wake up, the prices has gone up 1%. After 1 week, it's 7%. After 1 month, it's 30%, etc. Something that would kind of drive you crazy. The last thing you should know, maybe in terms of records, is that we have the biggest diaspora compared to those who live in countries. 3.2 million. Somebody is suffering from the presentation, but please close the mic. We're 3.5 million people in Lebanon, and we're almost 12.3 million outside the country, scattered a bit everywhere, from North America to Latin America and the Caribbean, even Sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, you name it. Now, sometimes things are really obvious. I mean, you don't need an evaluation degree to realize that things are not going well. So, for example, in terms of number of power cuts per month, and although our friends in Palestine are under occupation, and we're supposed to be a sovereign nation, we're ranked third in the world, you know, in terms of power cuts per month. In terms of the complete inefficiency of the electricity production system, we rank 7th in the countries who have to rely on a generator. And probably now when it gets 12, no, I mean, I would have finished before. You'll see that the electricity will go down, and that after 2 minutes, a generator would start. An even nicer one, and I don't know why the pictures jumped on one another. So this one, for example, you can see, on electricity, we spend about $2.5 billion every year over the last 30 years for an electricity that don't come. This is the roads after a regular rain, like one day of rain. After 1 day of rain, you see that the streets have flooded. This is a loan from the Islamic Development Bank of about $300 million to improve the infrastructure in the suburbs of Beirut. So, I mean, just visually, let it rain. Let's see if it has improved or not. The best one, my favorite, sadly, is this one. So this one is a dam, $90 million, World Bank, okay? And this dam, after being constructed, and after the civil society has said, you see, it falls in a protected area, there's a World Heritage Site downstream, and the environmentalists have been saying, guys, the soil is clay, it will never fly. But because there was a political will, and because the mafia felt it could make some money, they kind of insisted on making this dam. And now it's complete. They claim that it hadn't been handed over yet, but it's unable to retain water. So there would be more water when it rains on the street, like you saw in the previous picture, than in this bloody dam that has been constructed with World Bank money. So really, I mean, one picture would summarize what a 200-page evaluation report would say. It is not working. It is not implemented right. The logic behind the intervention might be relevant. Like, okay, if we increase the water supply, then we would cater for the needs of the people and have a better industry, etc. But on the other hand, if you look at how things are being done, it's again in the zoo. Everything is done to walk in the desert, but in the end, everything is happening in the zoo. Okay, a bit of news about what happened last year. I mean, I've been around for 51 years and counting and trying to still to escape COVID. I never left Lebanon, so I lived the civil war, I lived everything that came after. This year, to the best of my knowledge, 2020 has beaten them all. So it started with a massive protest on the street that threw the government out because the population was not particularly happy about the policies that were being made, and we're still in that stalemate ever since. So on and off a revolution. Then came COVID. In the beginning, we were speaking about the Lebanese miracle. So we were having, let's say, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 cases per day, but the mortality was really low, so 8, 10, and often people with morbidities. But all miracles come to an end at some point. So this is, on this picture, you can see the average death rate. Then came a critical point where the new cases exceeded the capacity of the hospitals, and then the average death rate skyrocketed, particularly this month. So since the beginning of the year, literally, it has been absolutely scary. No places in the hospitals. Before you would get COVID, I mean, you would be happy or let's say confident that you're going to make it. Now, looking at this graph, I mean, odds are not really by our side. And then came this thing that you also on the news. The most powerful man-made explosion that is non-nuclear. Again, I was here. I was on that same chair where I'm talking to you now, and which is about 2.5 kilometers away from the site of the explosion at the Beirut port, and the whole building shook. So I felt at some point that we were facing an earthquake, and all of Beirut was damaged. But here we are. The sun. It was raining this morning. The sun now is on my window. There's electricity. There's internet, so I can talk to you. And maybe, just like my good friend Khalil drew 3 lessons, I'm going to try and draw 3 lessons so that also Sister Umi has time to, so that we get into a discussion. Yeah, so 3 takeaways. The first one is I call the data on the wall. Help me to evaluate them all. Of course, when you have a explosion and the magnitude of the Beirut blast, everybody would rush in. So we've seen, in terms of presidents, our president did not go to the site of the explosion. He was afraid, I don't know from what, but like the president of France, Macron, came and visited the site of the explosion. There was a lot of aid coming in, to the extent that at some point it felt like a cacophony. So there was the big ones. So UNICEF wanting to save the children, and UNFPA wanting to save the women, and UNDP wanting to reconstruct, and WFP wanting to feed them all. But at the same time, there was a lot of NGOs, INGOs, private sector, citizen initiatives coming in. And what was really interesting to see in terms of the respondents is that almost a quarter of the initiatives were citizen initiatives. So let's say a restaurant who has been damaged, like the glass fell down or the walls were torn apart, but the kitchen was left intact. So they would start cooking meals for those who were displaced. A group of engineers would go and assess the damage and try to lead the reconstruction, etc., etc. So it was quite interesting. But after a certain moment, people started stepping on each other's toes. And there was increasing talks like, okay, a lot of money is coming, but we are not seeing anything of it. They got 1,000, they gave us 100, etc., etc. And the predicament to these all, you know it, we know it, I know it, it's evaluation. But a learning after the Beirut blast was that let's say the data system, the overall data system, pre-blast and post-blast was not fit for purpose. So, for example, if you go to the Ministry of Education and you would say, "Can I have a list of the public schools and the number of students attending these public schools before the blast?" Well, believe it or not, they would take 2 weeks to get them, when normally it should be one click away. We also saw, and when a central, reliable data is inexistent, you start having these sporadic assessments. So a company with 10 surveyors here, an NGO with 20 surveyors there, they would go and ask the questions that they would like to hear answers about. So for example, INGOs who are interested in distributing medicine would go and ask the citizens, what is the medicine that you take? They would not ask them from where are you getting this medicine, because they have an interest in distributing this medicine. Or organizations who were mainly interested in field hospitals. I mean, you saw in the COVID slide before that the Lebanese health sector, without the major trauma of COVID, is so good that it kept the death rate as one of the lowest in the world, although the contamination was kind of comparable to other countries. So rather than distributing medicine to the people, there would have been a more vested interest in, let's say, supporting the healthcare system overall, but that obviously does not fit in the agenda of some of the donor organizations. So bottom line, in order to be prepared to shocks, whether it's COVID or not, but whether it's a war, what have you, data is quintessential. So, and for us as evaluators to be able to be doing our job, we need also to have a strong component whereby we advocate for the data, because without good data, there is no, or let's say the path to evaluation is quite difficult. The second thing is that in these complex crises, we often saw response systems similar to the one that I'm showing now. So when the crisis happens, you need to proceed in that way. You need to map the needs. You need to prioritize them. I mean, what comes before the other? And you need to manage your resources accordingly based on the observed needs and based on the prioritization of these needs. But this is, let's say, the central planning part. At the implementation part, once you start addressing the needs, you need some kind of coordination on how aid is being dispatched or displayed. You need also to see if it's being implemented on track or not, and you need to monitor its impact. And this one, the scheme I'm showing you was the one that came out of a consensus from the different civil society groups that were doing the response. However, evaluation does not or should not come only at the end of the cycle and just to monitor the impacts. If you're implementing, you need to evaluate whether you're implementing right or not, and you need to evaluate in an agile manner so that if the implementation is not taking place as it should be, you don't wait until the end to see, oh no, it did not work. Similarly,
you have 30 seconds. Thank you.
Again?
Sorry, you have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. All right. The second thing, also, when you are trying to coordinate, you don't have to wait until the end to say that, oh, damn it, we did not coordinate right, etc., etc. So what I was dreading happened, and Umi wants to kick me out. The last thought I wanted to share with you, and very quickly, and I don't know what happened to my slides now, is you're probably aware that Oxfam has just released that the super rich recovered from COVID in 9 months. It will take the poor about 10 years to recover from it. There was also this article in Newsweek by Bhattacharya, who's, I mean, I cited Bhattacharya in my master's thesis back in 1993, who was saying that COVID lockdown may have no clear benefits versus other voluntary measures. In other words, build herd immunity and sacrifice the vulnerable and the elderly. On the other hand, another study has been showing that, on the contrary, looking back at the measures that were taken across Europe, there are some of the key measures, like let's say individual movement restrictions, that do brilliant results in facing COVID. So the main lesson, without expanding too much on this, is that if the exacerbation of vulnerabilities derived from COVID, but also from the Beirut blast, but also from all the disasters, if they are not translated into policy and action, and if they are not informed by evidence derived from implementation, you will see exactly what's happening yesterday. Yesterday, they burned the Serai. The Serai is the government that concentrates all government services, and this was the Serai of Tripoli, which is Lebanon's biggest city. So in order to avoid this, equity and the exacerbation of vulnerabilities needs to be taken into consideration. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Chief. Sorry for time reminder. It's too late. But you raised a very thought-provoking ideas about, putting the evaluators in the cage. We know the fact, we know the evidence, but we don't have any courage to speak to the power. Even though we reckon that, I think during the American Evaluation Society conference in 2018, I guess, so they raised a very big topic on speak to power, evaluation, speak to power. So this is also a call, Pak Yoga, perhaps. So actually, among evaluation professionals, regional in the region and also globally, we are, having collective actions to speak to power. This is also to highlight the important point from Pak Muammar presentation, that the credibility of the leadership is very important during or in the context of fragile conflict and vulnerable countries or context. So I think based on your insight, Pak Yoga, perhaps you can have some insightful ideas to share. Thank you. The floor is yours, Pak, now.
Thank you, Mi, and good afternoon and good morning to all of the participants, and maybe good evening also. This is my pleasure actually to be participating in this very interesting topic on conflict and disaster, the point of view of monitoring and evaluation. So thank you for also sharing with us to Muammar, Febri, my fellow actually, a colleague from the beginning of Aceh tsunami as well as conflict, and from Khalil on the Palestine, and also Rauf from Afghanistan, and finally Chief Ziad Moussa from Lebanon. And also thank you for Pak Dadek to be one of the co-hosts actually on this seminar. So I try to divide my presentation into two different topics actually, but finally I try to come up with some conclusion and some remarks on how the experience of conflict management as well as disaster management, especially in Indonesian case, will be influencing actually the monitoring and evaluation aspect or issues actually. But as everybody's starting everything from the planning point of view, I try to start with only three parts of my presentation. One is introduction, the second one is the planning and policy issues, and finally how those have the implication to the monitoring and evaluation. So I start with the conflict first. This is quite interesting that because most of the presentation from Khalil, Rauf, and Ziad related with the conflict, but I try to have my privilege actually to add the disaster point of view actually. So on conflict, I think if everybody is talking about the conflict in its countries, Palestine, Afghanistan, and Lebanon, I think Indonesia is almost similar actually. And we have at least if we try to just simply make it into two different kind of conflict, the horizontal and the vertical conflict. And we can see that the distribution of the conflict itself is quite interesting, like Aceh and then Papua in the east part of Indonesia, and some like in Riau in terms of the oil producing region actually. And then if you try to see how the conflict is the characteristic actually of the conflict in Indonesian case, this is going to be quite similar with what already been presented by Muammar, as well as maybe in every single country is already been presented. We have violent conflict, we have the government-related conflict, which is related with maybe vertical type of conflict, and also in terms of the election, because we are very big countries, more than 500 local governments, and maybe almost every year we have some election that triggered to such a conflict in terms of the implementation, as well as the separatists. We have also some separatist movement already in place for quite a long decades, but that's already been quite successfully something like cooling down actually, and just a little bit, something like fire actually needs to be put out of in the region actually. That's just going to be very interesting actually if you are talking about this kind of conflict in the region. And then try to have the analysis context of conflict itself, because we have already been experiencing conflict quite some time actually. For instance, like in Aceh, as Muhammad already been sending, there's maybe more than 30, 40 years actually of the conflict. Used to be, we call it the separatist conflict actually, that the liberation of the Aceh movement at that time, that needs to have the liberation of the province of Aceh actually. And finally in 2005, we have the Helsinki agreement that now everything is under control, and nobody there is going to be separated from the Indonesian jurisdiction. But we still have some small separatists still in the east part of Indonesia, in Papua, for instance, fueled by some Pacific countries as ally actually for the such separatist movement. But anyway, this is going to be very good figures on how we try to have or analyze the conflict issues actually in Indonesia, and try to have this kind of background, something like that, that geared upon the policy actually and the planning of how we are dealing with the conflict, and then how we try to put out the conflict from existence actually. And then next slide, this is the challenge. If you try to have the analysis context, and now about the critical challenge, we can see here that we need actually something like the the umbrella of the regulation of the conflict. Previously, back in maybe early 90s or maybe early a century of 2000s, we don't have any regulatory framework actually along with the conflict. This is almost similar with the disaster actually. We only had the big disaster like in Aceh, tsunami in 2004, and it fueled actually the government something like consideration that we need the regulatory framework actually towards the implementation of the conflict management as well as the disaster management into practice actually. So this is going to be one of the premises actually why we have the management of the conflict as well as the disaster started with the regulatory framework, and that's the government committed effort actually needs to be first thing first actually related with the regulation in this case or legislation. And then if we are trying to see the policy and the planning, we have actually the long-term development planning, because we need to talk about how to make the disaster, the conflict is very well planned actually, not really just reactive, effort or reactive in terms of post-disaster or post-conflict, reaction. But we try to have something like how to prevent. This is much more important actually, related with like the risk reduction, related the vulnerabilities, related with the capacity, how to deal with this kind of situation. We can tell it that we are talking about the two different disasters here. One is a social disaster, which is a conflict, and the second one, the natural disaster, and which is now expanded into the non-natural disaster like the pandemic and health issues along with this COVID-19 situation. So, and then after we have the very long-term planning as well as the law in 2012, actually. This is the first time actually in our history since the independence in 1945, we have the policy actually, or the regulatory framework or the legislation related with the conflict management. This is quite interesting because we've been through, you know, a lot of, you know, conflict, a lot of separatist, you know, issues. But finally, in 2012, we come up with the legislation on the conflict management, social conflict management in detail. This is quite a breakthrough actually, because this is the first time we have this kind of, you know, legislation. And then this is actually the basic idea how we finally, you know, formulating the law number 7 to year 2012 on the social conflict management. And you can see there that the conflict prevention framework, conflict early warning system, and also early response system, like which is very important, and the conflict sensitive planning, as well as, you know, peace building initiatives and so on and so forth. So that's actually the basic idea on how this law is finally you know, enacted. Actually, we are not dealing with how to deal with the post-conflict, but most of the idea or the legislation inside the law itself is much more related with how to prevent, actually, how to be more sensitive to conflict, and how to you know, prevent and mitigate the conflict, like early warning system and early response system, which is very different in changing the paradigm actually at that time from reactive or curative to the preventive and early warning system actually. And then oh sorry, we can see here also the paradigm shift that I just mentioned before, from response or reactive to prevention, centralized to more decentralized, security approach to more prosperity approach or welfare approach, government driven more in everybody business actually, partial reactive into the more comprehensive and then general to more specific, and also judicial to non-judicial formal. This is quite interesting, because we try to change actually the big paradigm of how we are dealing with the conflict management. And then the policy direction, we can see here some idea under the law itself, how to promote the peace sustainability actually in Indonesia. And it's already been adopted actually into government policy, government plan, especially in the medium-term development plan, 5-yearly. And this is actually our, you know, principal, you know, policy actually that needs to be well taken into consideration into the planning, you know, document, planning aspect. And then finally, this is actually how we try to intervene actually the conflict prevention, not only at the macro level, but try to have it more in the meso or intermediate level, as well as in the micro level, which is very important, because conflict sometimes is related with maybe man-to-man, between individual, between you know, communities. It is like the communal conflict, like the violent conflict. It used to be, you know, in a very micro level of you know, situation. And we have also some intervention here, the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So that's the way we are trying to see this kind of, you know, situation differently actually, in terms of the type of conflict we are, you know, facing actually. And then for the conflict sensitive, of course, we can see here conflict, you know, sensitive in the planning process. Peace building, capacity building is also very important, because we are talking about the management of the institution who manage, you know, which managing the conflict itself, and also the legal framework. This needs to be well, you know, managed properly. And finally, actually, this is the prevention again. This is also the three tiers of government, national government, local government, and much lower is the civil society, or like the village level, which is very, very important to be engaged actually in the framework of conflict prevention. And on the application of the monitoring and evaluation, this is going to be very good for us to understand about the challenges, because the capacities is not everywhere. We can see that the disparity of the capacity, like in Indonesia, this is very common to see the western part and the eastern part. The western part is mostly much something like advanced actually than the eastern part, which is much poorer and also backwardness in that area. So the capacity is also corresponding to that kind of dualism actually between the western and the eastern actually, and also how to mainstreaming the conflict sensitive, how to sustain the peace building. This is going to be very challenging actually in terms of the implementation of the planning and the policy itself. And this is going to be very important to be taken into account. We are talking about the monitoring and evaluation of the conflict itself, because conflict sometimes is not really, we cannot put out the fire completely, but it will be something like, the fire under the box, something like that. It's still burning actually. It can be burnable actually in this situation. And then after the challenges, we can see here about the opportunities. How the monitoring and evaluation is also needs to be considering this kind of the opportunities and also some enabling factors. Finally, the closing remarks of this conflict is four aspects that I need to share to all of you about this. Okay, monitoring and evaluation of conflict needs to be, of course, revisited or need to be reviewed, something like that, according to the shifted paradigm from reactive, responsive to the more preventive and so forth. And then we can see here that the underlying root of causes of conflict is also very important, because vertical, horizontal, if we are talking about the horizontal, like the violent conflict, and also some other kind of conflict, like communal conflict, and also ethnic conflict. Also, we're talking about the religious, interreligious conflict, and so forth. That's going to be good to understand about the root of conflict itself. And then strengthening the peace building, strengthening the continuous, like the conflict resolution, or conflict or peace development or peace building, something like that. It's very, very important to take into account. And finally, is emphasizing on the welfare rather than in the security, because security arming, like the armament and so on and so forth, is going to be in a very immediate conflict or post-conflict action. But if you are talking about the long term or medium term, we need to have the prosperity or the welfare orientation is much more important actually, rather than the security aspect. So that's the conflict. And then trying to continue with the disaster is almost similar, because the social and natural disaster. But again, I try to show you, especially colleague from non-Indonesian colleagues here. Indonesia is the supermarket or hypermarket of disaster. We have more than 16 types of disaster, name it, from the avalanche to the flood, the tsunami, the eruption, almost every day. You can. It is very, very common here that we learn from. There's an earthquake, there's a tsunami, there's a flood, there's a landslide. It's almost every day. So that's going to be very important actually for us to understand about how to manage the disaster in terms of like Muammar's already mentioned about the case of Aceh. It's only one of the issue at that time, which is we don't have any experience actually. That's why we developed the new institution like the BRR, and then we try to have to cope with some readiness actually of the local government and so on and so forth. So the sustainability is also very important to be taken into account. So and then the next slide is okay, SDGs. It's very clear that we need to deal with the disaster and also the climate change, properly, because at least half of the total 17 goals is related with the disaster and also climate change in this case. And then on the policy and planning aspect, fortunately, I try to tell you about this is quite fortunate. We just recently actually put the disaster management as one of the national priority in our development agenda. This is actually, maybe surprising, statement actually, especially from a non-Indonesian colleague, because we used to have a very big disaster like the Aceh in 2004, but why the disaster is just put into our development priority? Because this is going to be very good for us also to make some integration actually. We are talking about the disaster resilience. We are talking about the climate resilience, but not surprisingly actually, we try to cope those resilience into, of course, the natural or what we call the environment aspect, because we are talking about the environment, the habitat where the people lives actually. This is going to be very good for us to have this integration actually about the environment, disaster resilience, and also climate resilience, development. This is going to be one breakthrough actually, and this is the first time actually in our national development planning. We put that three, previously differently, put in our agenda into one integrated, priority of the development in Indonesia. And then next slide here is about the mainstreaming the disaster and also climate change into the plan itself and the policy framework. We have the strategic issues. We have also some policy that drawn by the strategic issues on how we are trying to improve, like the environment, how to enhance the disaster and climate resilience, and also, of course, we cannot just forget about the low carbon initiatives, which is also very important as a compensation actually on how we try to preserve the environment, but try to have some compensation in economic point of view actually. And then finally, on the balance of course, this is something like the shift of the paradigm as well. We are talking about the prevention and the preparedness. Used to be, something like less than the relief, recovery, and reconstruction. Now we try to shift into the more preventive action, more preparedness action, more mitigation initiatives actually, rather than the post-disaster. There's some consideration actually, because we need to be prepared actually. Like I said before, we are facing a disaster almost every day. So we have to prepare, not just wait and see. This is going to be, disaster will come. Ready or not, disaster will come. So that's the way we are trying to see that pre-disaster is very much more important actually than the post-disaster. Okay, this is you can see the distribution of the risk itself, the vulnerability, as well as the hazard over the nation. And next slide is the implication now on MONEV. You can see that now is our time actually in this year actually 2021. We are now doing what we call the reformation or the strengthening of the national disaster resilience system as a system, not partially try to cope with disaster resilience projects or programs, but the system itself. So we can see here we are dealing with the collaboration of the stakeholders, like Ziad mentioned also, like more than 300 stakeholders involved in the conflict in Beirut, for instance. Like in Indonesia, we are dealing with at least 5 different stakeholders. One is the government, as well as the local government. Second one is the community. The third one is what we call the private sector, yeah. And then the fourth one is the academicians or the researchers. And then finally the mass media, which is very important, talking about the disaster. So what we call the pentahelix, the 5 actors actually behind the disaster management needs to be well sanctioned and well consolidated actually. Talking also about the crisis recovery support system, because we need to have the readiness of the local government or local community, how the community resilience also need to be promoted, the strategic environmental support that's needs also taken into account, and as well as the integrated, reliable database, like Ziad also mentioned about the data on the wall. This is very, very important actually. Data is the most important actually. Otherwise, we can misleading actually our policy, and because the data in Indonesia now is thanks to the government actually having what we call the one integrated data system actually. System data, satu data Indonesia actually. What we call only one data now is consolidated by Bappenas actually, my previous office. And every single data now consolidated into one big server actually, and there's no more dispute about the data collection, data analysis, and also data provision actually for the development. And then finally, I try to compare this about the reform itself. MONEV will be emphasis on some aspect, and also disaster resilience MONEV framework needs to be well assessed, as well as some priority action for the monitoring and evaluation, as well as we are talking about the involvement of some stakeholders, and finally about the threat or what we call the hazard, what we call the vulnerability, what we call the risk actually, that needs to be well taken into consideration, as well as the capacity on how we are dealing with the disaster management. And the roadmap. We have also the roadmap actually for the next couple of years. One more minute.
Yoga, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I try to shorten actually. This is actually the until 2024, we try to focusing the monitoring and evaluation key indicators actually for the resilience system itself. So for instance, like related with according to Ziad's explanation on the data, the importance of data, one integrated disaster data, yeah, and then how to integrate it early warning system, because we are moving from responsive to the prevention actually. Early warning system is very, very important. The community empowerment, because we are talking about the capacity dealing with and then don't forget, conflict and disaster is very localized. We cannot have one policy fit all. We have to be more specific, be more concrete on the micro level. That's why community resilience is very important, and community empowerment is one of the vehicles actually into the resilience itself. And the collaborative institution, why we talk about the 5 different actors and to be consolidated into the one pentahelix. And finally, the financing. This is actually the fuel, how to fueling the policy itself to move forward. And finally, I think my last slide here, the closing remarks. I think this is going to be very good to have the priority agenda of Indonesian case, in terms of the medium term here, about try to be more emphasis on the disaster management, as well as climate change, resilient, as well as under the policy of the environmental, protection and also environmental management. And then we can see that about the process, how to protecting actually the community, how to reduce the victims of the disaster is also one of our main objectives actually. Yeah, and also maybe lessening the damage and losses actually on the disaster happens. And then also basic principles on reforming the disaster management, talking about the resilient system to be reformed and to be strengthened, as well as talking about the medium term that needs to be well, guided actually. And we have some target actually towards, that's why like the roadmap 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, we have very well planned, initiatives actually. And the fifth is talking about the understanding the awareness of the MONEV, which is very, very important to get along how we are trying to achieve the target or the objectives. And finally is how the underlying basic, like the indicators that it's already been, set into the planning process actually. The MONEV indicators is very, very important actually to be, taken into our priority agenda actually to move forward actually along with the process of development in the medium term as well as for the long term development, agenda. So I think that's my presentation. I hope I don't, take most of the time, and we still have some time to discussion. Thank you, me and colleague participating in this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yoga, for a very insightful presentation. So, Bapak and Ibu, this is actually a very important reunion between me and Pak Yoga. Pak Yoga is actually my first supervisor in monitoring and evaluation. Otherwise, I just, like a regular researcher. It doesn't mean that I'm undermining the role of a researcher. So thank you, Pak Yoga. So now, again, we will go ahead and take some time for questions. And just a reminder, Bapak and Ibu, please be sure to type your questions in the chat box because we want to hear more from you. If you have any question, please raise now. So we have 3 questions now, Pak Yoga and all speakers. So the first one is from Yuniarti Wahyuning Tias to Mr. Muammar Febri. Where were the KRF project under UN ORC at the time? Was the project give significance to support the reintegration, recovery, and development of Aceh at that period? And then we have second questions to all presenters. Monica Azahra, I'm not sure where she came from. Could you share to us how was your experience in conducting remote monitoring process evaluation of the impact during this pandemic? Could you share the most effective way and tools? And then the next question is from my side. I studied the politics of evaluation in Belgium, and one of my professors taught me that in a closed system country, we cannot just tell the truth or fact as it is. So it is sort of justification to undermine the role of independency and impartiality here as an evaluator. So even there are some approach like the problem-driven iterative analysis, the PDIA. This is the branch of the political economy analysis. This is a very important tool to help us as evaluators to define realistic assumptions and influence about change, Bapak and Ibu, and all speakers. But how actually to tell honesty in the project documents or project strategies, or to speak to the power? Because actually working with international NGO donors, it seems the same with working with the government. So another effort from the evaluation society is very important recently. So speak to power to push for a credible leadership, as mentioned by Pak Muammar Febri in the FCP context, because this is quite significant to drive change. How to do it? Any insight for us professional evaluators? So to Pak Yoga, perhaps, how do you see the actual role of evaluation professionals in Indonesia, or maybe in ASEAN countries? how do you see that role? Is it influential instead of more administrative or mechanical? So this is just an analogy or illustration drawn by Ziad, Chief Ziad. So in order to have more influential role, so in post-truth era, is it relevant to speak to power nowadays? Is it safe for us? What do you expect from us as evaluators to help you execute better policy in the FCB context with more meaningful M&E in Indonesia? Even though one of the study from UN, they mentioned that Indonesia is the most advanced one in an M&E infrastructure meaning on the institutionalization, but the quality is still, we have many challenges. So, and also in post-truth era, do you think one data policy is relevant here, Pak? What if the leaders is, you know, threatening the data? So yeah, okay, back to all speakers. Who will start the response? Please, all the floor is yours now. Maybe from the first speaker, Pak Muammar.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maumi. Do you want me to only address the first question or more comprehensive question as well that you have been outlining before based on your experience in Belgium?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
both, yeah? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, kind of both,
I think for the first questions, okay, right. I think for the first questions, yes, we noted, I mean, this was like back 15 to 16 years ago, yeah? I tried to refresh my mind, but I do acknowledge there was a program under the UNO, you know, on this KRF. And actually, I think the program was aimed to facilitate the linkages between the provincial and the district government. To what extent the program has been successful, I can't really comment on it because I was not involved on that program, but I believe that it helps a lot in terms of bridging the information, bridging the knowledge, bridging the technical gap and so on. I think that's what it's supposed to be under the UN program, especially under the post-conflict or post-disaster program, whereby they act as a honest broker in facilitating the knowledge transfers and also supporting the local government to reach certain level of technical capability to ensure proper coordination and so on. So whether they're doing something significant at the field level, I believe it does. But to what extent, I believe it's something that needs to be further studied. I mean, perhaps the people who are asking this question can study the program evaluations, which I believe is available now on the public sphere. I think the second question, I think Mbak Umi gives us a very good mind-blowing questions. I think this is very fundamental questions, especially the relationship between the political economy and the evaluation itself. Do take this positively because I think we need to do a self-reflection. As a monitoring professional, evaluation professional, we need to reflect as well. We need to question ourselves. So I like this term, a very good term coined by Umberto Eco, that self-skepticism is a first way for development. So I think we need to have strong self-skepticism in order to make change and also came out with a workable solution. How do we bring our structured knowledge from monitoring and evaluation so that it can influence the leadership in the decision-making process? First, I think we need to realize that in many cases, I'm not saying at all that we are doing monitoring is for the sake of monitoring. While monitoring should be the tools for the planning and also for the management. I think this is a very fundamental aspect that needs to be addressed. But how to address that, this is also a very critical question that we need to do a lot of soul searching to find that answers. And also, I kind of disagree when we say the politicians are the root issues, are the problems. I don't believe that because perhaps, but this is just my theory, yeah? Perhaps we do not speak their language, yeah? And I don't believe all politicians are bad because politics, being a political scientist myself, politics is a hegemonics, yeah? Political science is a mother of all knowledge. At least that's what the political scientist thinks of. Every day we live in the politics. Relationship at home is based on politics. Relationship in the office is based on the politics. But when we are talking about politics, sometimes we're only talking about the practical of the politics at the public lives. So when we talk about politics, sometimes we tend to think it with the context what psychoanalysis says as affective realism. So we create our own reality, and then we say all the politician is bad, so we cannot communicate. I think this is a very fundamental mistake. Yeah. So what do we need to do to address this? I think first we need to communicate more. We need to open our horizons. Yeah. We need to build strong policy network and a virtuous circle. Meaning, in the simplest term, we need to talk a lot with people who are playing or within the context of power, vis-a-vis the politician. So open our horizon, make friends with them, understand them. Perhaps we don't understand their language. Yeah? Perhaps they don't understand our language. For a very simple reason, because the structure of their logic is different from us. We need to understand them. We need to know how the politician thinks. We need to understand the structure of power very well so that we can communicate the importance of M&E for development, the importance of M&E in the decision-making process. I mean, have we ever studied the structure of power, for instance? I mean, there is a logic, semantic, ethics, metaphysics, and even politics. Politics is only one aspect of the structures of power. Last but not least, I think we've done a lot of evaluation, but sometimes what we are lacking is that the focus on knowledge management. This is what I've witnessed as well on over 20 years of experience, that we've done a lot of good things like we do in Aceh, we do in Yogyakarta, but the next days when the disaster hits, everything going back to the square one. So I think in order to make the whole evaluation works, we need to open our horizons. We need to influence our leader. We need to talk with political scientists. We need to work more with the politician itself, make them understand us, make them in a very simplest way that they do understand our point of view. So last, as I say, we need to focus on knowledge management, focusing on tacit and explicit knowledge so that those knowledge generated from the monitoring and evaluation can be sustained for future use. Over to you, Mbak Umi. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pak Muammar. And then next, perhaps Rauf. Oh, sorry, our fellow Rauf is already left for a meeting. And then perhaps Khalil. Sorry.
Thank you, Umi. Which question you like me to answer? I
think both, because you are also an activist in evaluation. So I believe that.
Yeah.
That's also very important.
Okay, this is really a very important question. I'll try to be brief as well. So one question was about the independence in evaluation. This is a very tricky issue in evaluation. Many organizations claim to have an independent unit of monitoring and evaluation. Yet the salary comes from the central agency. They approve the reports. They have make the TOR. So with independence is very, very critical. And even evaluators, when we call ourselves independent evaluators, I question how often do we really or can bite the hand that feeds us? When are we really saying no and putting observation? Of course, we have to do everything in good communication. I don't think the evaluation field, which in a way very young field, infant field, still 50 years, that has good answers to this point about the independence of evaluations. Some organizations do it better than others in terms of the evaluation units have some oversight of their activities more than other central units or the managers or the implementers, but still a lot of work on that. And the other topic is speaking truth to power, which I'm very, very interested in. And as Umi said, I see myself, and I usually talk a lot about evaluation activism and the role of especially young and emerging evaluators in the field of evaluation. To be activists. Our role in evaluation is not just to review data. I mean, today we spoke a lot about monitoring, which is fine, which is important, because if we don't have data, we don't know where we're going. Like Ziad has nicely put it.
Hello?
Actors are doing. But data is not everything. And evaluation is much more than comparing numbers or doing even some qualitative research. It has to have contextual understanding, and evaluators have to live the experience, to be caring about the society they're working in order to give good evaluation. Like we saw in the one presentation, I think from Mr. Muammar, I think is good, but I was surprised how much of the work done, as he explained, done by consultancy firms from abroad that know so well and they have good reputation. That's good. But I think national evaluators with good knowledge and stake, they have skin in the game in the country, are much better than hotshot evaluators from abroad who come and don't know the context. And they never speak truth to power. They don't care because they come from abroad. They have $1,000 a day, perhaps daily rate. They do 25 days of research, 6 days of desk review, and then bye-bye. You know, national evaluators often they are integrated in these problems. They know what speaking truth to power means. They know their local governance, politicians in general. But at the same time, a lot of hope in this are coming from young and emerging evaluators, I think, because they're pushing for issues like social justice, climate change, which is surprisingly today, with all the presentations, we did mention about the disasters, resilience, about conflict. But do you notice that climate change is all over this, everywhere? Even many conflict issues stem from climate change. Disasters, of course, it's highly linked. Population, social issues. I feel in our countries, in the global south in general, I feel there's not a lot of attention paid by evaluators, but also politicians on the issues of climate change. Sometimes we feel comfortable saying the US and perhaps China and perhaps Italy are polluting the world, and we are the ones who are receiving these negative consequences. But there are lots to do on the individual and the government level to be more climate aware and deal with this really challenge of our time problem. So evaluators need to speak about social justice, equity, about and working with politicians. Well, very good point, I think, the other colleague mentioned. But sometimes it doesn't mean, you know, working with them in a way always to find synergy, and sometimes confronting them. Sometimes evaluators have to show reports and finding and evidence. I hope that every evaluation association would have some kind of annual report on governance, transparency, on corruption and everything. We're very small. Even the biggest evaluation association in the US, it's not huge in budget and number of evaluators part of it. Lastly, very quickly, because I had a lot of experience doing this, the experience of remote monitoring. Of course, there is a lot of details about it, but I would say that really context matters. There's a lot of questions always when I attend webinars or speak. You will ask, what is the best way of doing remote monitoring? There's no best way to do remote monitoring. In some evaluation recently I worked on, you know, I thought the best way was to use WhatsApp messages and recorded blah, blah, blah with some certain beneficiaries or rights holder. Some other times it was Facebook because they use it so much. Other times phone calls. So the bottom line is not to compromise the quality, ask for data, still not saying, okay, because we have limited time and resources, we'll interview 3 people from the program. No, we have to reach out to the rights holders. We have to speak to the beneficiaries. We have to reach them. We cannot just say we did an evaluation without speaking to beneficiaries. Don't want to take so much time, although I can speak a lot more about these issues. Thank you, Umi, and everyone.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Alil. Next is Chief Ziad. Are you still here?
Yes, I'm still
okay.
here.
Okay.
For your
good.
eyes only.
Sorry. Okay.
Actually, I don't have much to add. Khalil brilliantly framed it. One of the singularities of our profession, or let's say 2 singularities. The first one, in evaluation, your best reference is your previous assignment. So in that sense, you need to get a certain momentum going. And as Khalil said, on top of like, even when you have an independent department or unit, you as an evaluator evaluating, let's say, a program by MONEV, it's MONEV paying you. So how can you speak truth to power in this regard? There would be a big, quite a big question mark. The other thing, maybe on third party, I see the danger, a danger in third party, and that danger is as follows. So the legwork, going, talking to beneficiaries, collecting data, etc., is something that local evaluators do, while the evaluation, getting the big picture, formulating recommendations, etc., is that evaluators coming by plane for 10 days can do. And this is a big danger. So it rests on the shoulders of the VOPEs, but also the other stakeholders, the commissioner, the government, etc., to request locals. And maybe one would argue that someone from Aceh would not speak bad about, or would not speak the full truth about what the government of Aceh is doing, although himself or herself, parents, family, children, etc., live over there. There is an interest in regions. So Indonesia by itself is half a continent. So like cross-fertilizing between different regions, between different ethnicities, between different cultures. What we try to do in Evalmena also is to kind of build a momentum at the MENA level so that you don't have to import. You can just flip evaluators around. So that is all what I wanted to say. I have a dental appointment in now 11 minutes, but there's a lockdown, so the streets should be relatively empty. It was an absolute pleasure to very enriching experience. What I learned about Indonesian context, about Afghanistan, even about Palestine, I mean, was absolutely absolutely great. And until the next one, inshallah. Salam.
Thank you so much, Chief, for your insight. It's really useful for us. So the last one is Pak Yoga. So we have also another round of questions. So I just directly give it to Pak Yoga. Please, Pak Yoga.
Thank you. I have at least 3 questions coming from Jasmine, Yuni, and maybe Monica. I think most of the question coming from same office here in Rehab BNPB in Pramuka, actually, which is the disaster aspect that needs to be very well, thought actually in terms of this seminar. Okay, from Jasmine, I think this is going to be very good for us to see that. Don't forget, I was involved actually in the preparation of the master plan for disaster management 2020-2044. This is the first time in the world actually that one country has a very long, something like the master plan actually, or the roadmap, or what we call the blueprint actually for disaster management. More than 20 years actually, 2020 to 2044. And on the RIPB, what we call the Rencana Induk Penanggulangan Bencana, or the Master Plan for Disaster Management, very long term, we have actually one specific chapters on the monitoring and evaluation. And please be sure that I'm a planner, but I'm also I need to be, considering monitoring and evaluation as a process actually. Planning, actuating, organizing, actuating, and controlling means that we need to be embedding actually the monitoring and evaluation into the controlling, aspect. And then something like a cyclist actually, like a cycle that from the monitoring and evaluation, we come up with a new planning period actually along with the process actually, that we need to have some adjustment, some refinement, or also some maybe a changing of the policy or the action in terms of refining or improving the planning for the next years or the next period of planning process. So that's the way we are trying to have that in every single planning document, even like the RPJM, the medium-term development plan. I'm talking first about the general terms of the planning document. We always have the monitoring and evaluation, section or chapters actually, because this is very important to have the idea on how the MONEV actually needs to be well embedded actually into the planning document itself. We cannot just ignoring the planning separately, but it has to be embedded into the planning document itself. Even like in Bappenas or in Bapeda office actually, the local planning office in the region, we always had what we call the evaluation and monitoring division. Like in the Bappenas, from the 9th, the deputy minister, one deputy minister is very responsible on the monitoring and the planning actually, monitoring and evaluation actually, and also the controlling. So that's the way we are trying to keep the MONEV actually along with the process of the planning itself. So, and then maybe next question is on the platform of the DRR. I was the midwife of the national platform actually back in 2009. So please be sure that I won't forget the baby that I was facilitating actually at that time to be here. But the problem is the national platform is not really active. The national platform is just very much relying on the BNPB facilitation, which is not really independently carrying out their responsibility actually. National platform is very multi-stakeholders actually, comprised of maybe the government is not really the core actually there, but the private sectors, the community, the academicians or researchers, as well as what we call the media actually, like the pentahelix that already been introduced actually recently. But back in 2009, when I was facilitating the establishment of the national platform of DRR, it's already been in place actually. But the problem again about the independency of the national platform in managing actually or counterparting actually the government in terms of managing the DRR in much more detail. And then of course, talking about the capacity of the province, the district, the municipalities is also very problematic actually. We are dealing with more than 550 local governments. There are 34 provinces and more than 514 district and municipalities. But we can see that only about less than 2/3 actually, less than 60% actually of the local government is quite responsible actually, quite responsive, quite be responsible in doing the disaster management properly, and also in the locally based initiatives. Most of them is still just wait and see, and then waiting for the subsidy from the central government, or waiting from the for the facilitation from the central government. So that's not the good figures actually, and we still have some homework actually on how we try to improve or increase the capacity, or building the capacity, or building the competency actually of the local government in managing the such. Of course, conflict as well, because conflict is also very much localized, as I mentioned, but there's no evidence that the local government is already been quite prepared actually in dealing with the conflict or even the disaster in the much bigger figures in this. And then finally, along with the question on the post-disaster recovery, we know that like Muammar's Fabri's mentioned on the Build Back Better, we understand that the responsibility of the local government is still very, very low. If we can try to make a joke, actually, the local government is not very much committed actually to deal with the recovery process. That's why in Aceh case, why the BRR was established at that time, because the local government was collapsed. But in Jogja, we didn't establish any new institution because the local government is very committed. But that's the case of Java. If you are trying to drag those experience in Java into out of Java, the result will be different. Like the one that we had in West Nusa Tenggara, and just recently 2 years ago in also in Central Sulawesi. This is not moving actually. Everybody, this is very, very evidence-based actually, that the refugees or the IDPs actually is still there. Because, the local government is not really paying attention properly actually in managing the post-disaster recovery. And the recovery here is very much related not only for the 2 R's, but the 3 R's: rehabilitation, reconstructions, and relocation. They don't have any experience in this kind of issues. So that's the thing that related with some question here. And finally, on the resource mobilization, that's also related with my previous response, because of like the national platform which was initiated because of we need the counterparting with the government initiatives from the private sector, but because this is not really working, so the involvement or the contribution of the private sector is not really significant. We still see that the private or entities and also like the NGOs is always paying their attention on the emergency relief, because this is very politically something like driven sometimes, something like that. Political parties and some private sectors try to help like the flash appeal. Muhammad Fabrice knows it very well. When Aceh hit by tsunami, almost maybe more than 36 different countries bilaterally, as well as the multilateral agencies, flash appeal and then coming to Indonesia and will help the government of Indonesia. But only a few actually try to help in the process of the long-term recovery actually, like the one that we had in Central Sulawesi back after Aceh, and then we stopped actually Aceh and Jogja, and then we stopped the what we call the external assistance, and then suddenly we open again when the tsunami and liquefaction hit Palu 2 years ago. But there's no such free lunch actually. Previously in Aceh, all grants, but in the case of the Palu or Central Sulawesi, now loans actually, like the World Banks and the ADB. There's quite different actually orientation actually. The people abroad will help, and also will do the even the private entities actually. There's no such a clear commitment actually to help the process of the recovery. And then finally, along with the question on the, I try to put in my notes here on the process of I think Monica or Uni, yeah. Okay, that's on the issue strategies. Okay, this is in Indonesia actually. The strategic issues actually we try to have some what we call the a commitment actually or agreement actually with different parties on how we try to drag all of the contribution actually towards what we call the not only build back better, but build back better, safer, and more sustainable, which is very important. I think this is quite along with the conflict resolution because we need to have a more sustainable peace situation like the peace building, also along with the reconciliation as well as conflict prevention in the long run actually in terms of this conflict. So that's disaster and conflict situation that needs to be well taken into our priority actually in the future. So that's my response, Umi. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Pak Yoga. It looks like that we have covered all of the questions here. I saw some participants raising their hands, but sorry, we have to pass. Please write to me. I can later convey to all the speakers. Now, I think Pak Muammar, Khalil, Rauf, Chief Ziad, who has just left, and also Pak Yoga. I think I should give you more opportunity if there are anything else you wanted to cover before the wrap up, but we don't have more time, so sorry for this. And also we already exceed the time around maybe 40 minutes. And please write to me if you have something as the closing remarks. We will send later to participant by email. So basically, Bapak and Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, robust pandemic for natural disaster, conflict preparedness and response with the help of meaningful monitoring and evaluation is an urgent need to address vulnerability and also to prevent, detect, and respond to any emergency situation in a FCV context. It contributes to universal social security, protecting all people from threats to their health, to their economic, social status, and also ideally should be integrated in a broader effort to strengthen the development system and make people more resilient. So I think there are a huge homeworks for particularly for professional evaluators, as also indicated by all speakers here. Thank you so much, everyone. Bapak and Ibu, we appreciate you being here. Pak Teguh Ahmad Dade, Pak Iwan, MONEV Studio team, Liquina, Fajaria for hosting the event, and also simultan translation. Thank you so much. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see. We will see you next time. But I would like to ask Pak Teguh Dadek for the closing ceremony. Take care and stay healthy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pak Teguh Dadek, the floor is yours.
Ya, terima kasih. Thank you for everybody that we got many things from this discussion, and then it's very important for us, especially for Aceh Province. We hope that all what you have presentation today, it can be useful for us for make a better MONEV in Aceh. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih. Thank you, Bapak Ibu. Terima kasih, Pak Teguh Dadek, Pak Yoga, Pak Muammar Khalil. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
All the best. Enjoy your day. Terima kasih, Bu Yuni.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Pak Rando, waalaikumsalam. Sampai ketemu, Pak Muammar. Terima kasih insight-nya. Banyak PR kita. Sampai ketemu. Bapak Ibu, terima kasih banyak. Terima kasih. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Ada Pak Amril, terima kasih. Pak Mas Teguh Afriza. Pak Rando dari Stunting. Iya, ya. Makasih banyak Pak Yoga. Oh, Cak Lul. Makasih. Pak Susantio, makasih Pak. Terima kasih Pak Jasmi dari BNPB.
Terima kasih Mbak Umi.
Terima kasih Mas Alul.
Terima kasih Bu Umi.
Terima kasih Pak Rando, Stunting. Gimana MONEV-nya?
Ya, lagi proses.
Iya, mantap Pak. Yang MONEV Stranasnya dulu, itu.
Iya, lagi berproses Bu.
Iya.
Masukannya.
Maaf yang dulu itu karena ya saya yang nyusun pendumnya Pak.
Oh iya.
Jadi memang mungkin agak bias ya karena diminta untuk merefer ke sana.
Iya. Next discuss ya Bu.
Siap ya. Pak, siap kapan-kapan kita discuss. Sama-sama Pak Rando, enjoy your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Salam sehat semuanya.
Ya, sama-sama. Izin live.
Iya, kami juga izin live. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu semuanya. Assalamualaikum.
Salam.